Good morning. Are we on the record?
We're on the record.
Okay, we're on the record in Sanderson versus Paltrow, and counsel are present. Were there any items we needed to address before the jury is brought in?
A few, may I?
Sure.
Your Honor, we had an exhibit D83 that had some personal information that we wanted to redact. So Peter would like to are you prepared to switch it out right now?
We can just redact it really quick.
Oh, can we have your and the clerk's binders, and we're just gonna blacken out a little piece of personal information that we didn't catch earlier. Secondly, Your Honor, I just want to be clear on something. As I recall, plaintiffs filed a motion that we weren't going to comment on Mr. Sanderson if he was not present all of the time. And yet, I was surprised to hear a plaintiff bring that out with Sam Goldstein. That was an entirely new opinion, entirely broadside, that Goldstein now had advised Mr. Sanderson that it wouldn't be good for him, in part because Mr. Sanderson does not take criticism well. I think that was violative of the court's order, which again was made on plaintiff's own motion. And I think that's now open game because the door has been opened. So I don't know how to address it except for the jury now knows on the advice of his therapist that it's not healthy for Mr. Sanderson to be here. So I just want to know, everyone to know, I may bring it up now because it has been brought up.
And what part of the order came out of that motion, pretrial motion?
Thank you. Perhaps my memory fails me that it was a formal motion versus an informal conversation. I'd be interested in plaintiff's memory on that.
I know there was some discussion of it. I thought there was a motion. I mean, it's not...
Your Honor, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I recall there being conversation about it. I mean, some argument and discussion formally, and I don't recall whether there was I think there was some kind of a motion from the plaintiff.
And Peter's telling me that it was discussed, but perhaps didn't make it into the written order. I'd be interested in plaintiff's memory of that and the court's.
Okay. Maybe you could find it, Peter, in the papers, and we can address it during a break.
And mostly, I guess, it sounds like I'm not restricted then from talking about it. That mostly I was concerned, like, am I in trouble for bringing it up? But it sounds like if it's not in a written order, and if they have brought it up, then I'm okay. That's was my goal in bringing it up.
Mr. Bueller?
It depends on what they bring up. I'm not sure what he's proffering right now. It's hard to talk about something I don't know about yet.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
Bob Sykes was kind enough to call me last night and say that they intend to call Gwyneth Paltrow before Terry Sanders. Is that still the case? Sanderson.
That was supposed to be a private phone call, Steve.
I didn't know that, but I do need to bring this up because if they're supposed to rest today, Bob, if you tell me this needs to be private, I will keep it private, but you didn't say that.
Want a minute with council and talk about it?
If it's not going to be this morning, we can do it this afternoon. Why don't we wait?
Okay. Thank you.
By the way, Bob, I was complimenting you for being upfront with me, so it wasn't a diss.
Please, no more compliments from you.
Any more issues before the jury comes in? Can you cue up the video and get it ready? Okay. And are we ready to bring the jury in? All right, we're ready. We're ready to continue with Richard Baum's testimony by video. Glad to see everybody made it despite the perpetual snowstorm that we have outside. So, thank you. Mr. Sykes, you may proceed.
By the way, it says name Bain. Bain. Yeah.
Okay. So earlier you testified that you believe there's only one way this crash could have happened, which is that Ms. Paltrow hit Terry Sanderson from behind. If another expert like Irving Scher says otherwise, how would you think of that opinion if that was the case?
Well, I would disagree with it. And I would like to know what the basis of his opinion was. That's basically the short answer, but if he came up with a different opinion, then maybe he considered other information that I may not have had in formulating that opinion. So I would certainly be interested in knowing what the basis of that type of an opinion.
And do you recall a defense expert, Robert Hush, MD?
Yes, that's the neurologist.
And his report is, the actual written part is less than 6 pages, maybe 5 even. And most of it is, or much of it is the review of his, the things he reviewed. Is it your understanding that Dr. Hush did not examine Terry Sanderson personally, correct?
That's my understanding.
What does that mean to you regarding his opinions, this Dr. Hush?
I have always myself have insisted on examining the patient directly to corroborate the medical records and to get more insight, because medical records are just what they are, records. If you have the source in front of you that you're able to query, I find that that is very, very helpful. So some people or some of my professional colleagues don't do that, and I feel that they may be at a disadvantage in doing it that way. But my preference has always been to examine the patient.
I'm just going to read you what his report says. This Dr. Hush.
It's Dr. Hesh, actually.
Hesh,
just to
okay.
help you. Yeah.
Dr. Hesh, he says on page 3, the persisting neurological symptoms Mr. Sanderson reports since the February 2016 ski accident are likely attributable to pre-existing health conditions. How would you respond to that?
I would disagree with that. I mean, even though he does have a history of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, I do not feel that he had those symptoms beforehand and they became prevalent after the closed head injury. So you have to be able to account for that timeline, if you will, or that clinical history.
Then on page 4, he says under part 2, I'm not entirely convinced that Mr. Sanderson experienced a mild concussion. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would definitely disagree with that. I mean, we have evidence of him having the disorientation afterwards. So certainly there were concussive symptoms noted shortly after the event, which would define the concussion. And it's like I said, the issue has always been whether or not these symptoms are permanent or transitory in nature.
Then on page, bottom of page 4 under number 3, he says, the persisting symptoms Mr. Sanderson attributes to the ski accident are subjective ones, confusion, memory problems. Objective criteria do not establish that Mr. Sanderson experienced a permanent neurological injury during the ski accident. How would you respond to that?
Well, keep in mind, in this particular type of patient, you have the objective evidence of the witnesses, the before and after witnesses, and of course, you have the medical records. So that is certainly more objective because you're getting it from an observer. So that would certainly be objective in nature.
What about this, the ski patroller, Whitney Smith, who saw Terry Sanderson showing mild disorientation within about 10 or 15 minutes of the crash? How would that affect your response to Dr. Hesh?
Well, once again, that's an observer that observes someone that's disoriented. That would be an objective finding.
And then he says on page 5, Mr. Sanderson's neurological function is normal, and his records and imaging do not provide any indication of neurological or any indication for neurological treatment. Any response to that?
I would tend to defer that to his treating physicians, but certainly there is evidence in the records that he has ongoing neurological problems that need to be addressed. To what extent that they're being addressed, I would refer to his treating physicians.
Okay, the next defense expert is Stephen Edgley. Were you able to review his report?
Yes, but I don't recall who he is right off the top of my head.
Okay, he's a board certified with, he claims, with the American Board of Physician Medicine and Rehabilitation.
Oh, PM&R. He's a PM&R specialist. I remember him, yes.
He says something different than Dr. Hesh. He says, compelling evidence, on page 3, he says, Dr. Edgley says, compelling evidence indicates plaintiff's concussion was mild and that he lost consciousness only momentarily, if at all. How would you respond to that?
Well, the concussion is mild. I mean, it certainly could result in some catastrophic finding like persistent vegetative state, death. I mean, he was able to get to the clinic, but so I would consider it mild as well, but the loss of consciousness certainly was present.
So when we say mild, is that kind of a sometimes deceiving term for some people, in your opinion?
Objection leading.
Well,
How would you, let me rephrase, how would you describe mild when it comes to a traumatic brain injury? Can you have, the question is can someone have profound problems from a mild TBI?
I wouldn't say profound. I could say significant problems you can have with mild TBI, depending on what the problems are. But as far as he's able to take care of his personal hygiene, which I queried him about, he's able to get about, he's able to travel, these types of things. So, and keep in mind, he was a high-functioning individual before this. He's a retired optometrist, so with a rather high IQ. So he's able to function pretty well, but certain things that he enjoyed doing before the accident, he can't do afterwards. And this can impact him. Now, how significantly it does, I defer to his before and after witnesses and to his treaters, but certainly there was a change.
How does an MTBI affect a person, or what is the range of effects? Can it be, you said,
Well,
can it be significant or?
Well, let's back up. There are numerous classifications of TBI, and different organizations have come out with this based on Glasgow-Coma scale, length of amnesia, these types of things, loss of consciousness, findings on cranial imaging. It boils down to functionality because that's what the brain does. It allows us to function, interact with our environment and other individuals. So a catastrophic, I'll just start from the words and go backwards. Catastrophic means persistent vegetative state or death. Serious, you can't take care of your own personal hygiene, so you need attendant care. That would be serious. Moderate, you're able to take care of your personal hygiene, but you can't hold down a job or do anything outside of that. That would be moderate. Mild, you're able to take care of your personal hygiene, but you're able to venture outside of the home and interact to a certain degree, but it's been affected. Now, how you perceive it as being significant or not depends on the individual person. So you can have significant problems with a mild TBI, but it's certainly not going to keep you housebound and is certainly not death or persistent vegetative state. So mild, that's what it means by mild, okay? I will tell you this, anytime you have a traumatic brain injury, that is not good.
And how about, or what are your opinions about some of the other experts for the defense? There's two neuropsychologists. One is Galit Askenazi, and the other one is Angela Eastfold. Have you had a chance to review theirs?
Yes, and I guess they were going to critique the treating neuropsychologist, if you will. And obviously they have differing opinions, but you know, the level at which they're talking about, I mean, the guy has issues. And keep in mind that one of the problems that you have with patients with TBIs, if they have the wherewithal or the insight that they realize that they have lost something, some type of function, is a loss. And so they tend to develop psychiatric manifestations of this loss in the form of depression and anxiety. And if they have a previous history of that, it just makes it worse. And so it's kind of like an exacerbation of those symptoms as well from what we call a non-organic standpoint. So you have to take that into consideration. And I see that there was issue taken on both sides with regards to those non-organic issues. But the fact still remains is that the brain was not functioning the way it was after the accident as it did before the accident. And so that's where the organic diagnosis of the mild TBI comes into play. So keep in mind that as humans, we do carry the psychiatric side of things with illness as well.
What does that mean, psychiatric?
Well, we're all emotional creatures, right? So we respond to our environment in different ways. Some people are more stoic than others, and others tend to, you know, bare their souls. So if they suffer a loss of some sort, it can manifest itself according to the DSM-5, if you will. That's the psychiatrist working handbook, if you will. Keep in mind, neurologists are boarded by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. And the reason for that is that neurochemistry is so in depth that permeate both specialties. Our training has a significant overlap. Neurology training is 2/3 neurology, 1/3 psychiatry, and vice versa from the psychiatrist. So there's a significant overlap because the clinical manifestations sometimes are subtle between one diagnosis and another.
So, just in summary, Terry Sanderson, in your opinion, suffered a mild traumatic brain injury or closed head injury in this ski crash, correct?
A mild TBI as a result of a closed head injury.
Okay. And the evidence from the broken rib x-rays indicate that he was hit from the back side. Or what are your opinions regarding that?
He was hit from the rear on the left side to the right, and then made contact with the ground.
And when someone suffers those kinds of broken ribs, what manifestations would you expect to see from those broken rib injuries right after the trauma that causes the break?
Chest wall pain and pain on breathing. And if it's severe enough, you would actually have shortness of breath.
Why don't we take a quick break for like 3 minutes, and then we'll probably finish up, and then James can have you, if that's okay. Thank you.
Well, let's make it about 5 so people have a chance to use the bathroom if they want to, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Going off record, the time is 2:04. Back on record, the time is 2:09.
Dr. Bain, how is it possible for a neurologist, for example, to come to a reliable opinion in a case such as this without an examination of the patient, in your opinion?
Well, obviously it depends on the diagnoses, but certainly it would be more difficult without the patient. But it depends on the diagnosis that you're considering.
Well, how about in this case of Terry Sanderson?
Well, you want to know if his symptoms have persisted, if you're going to make the opinion that his symptoms are permanent or not from a neurological standpoint. So I would think that it is important, but it's like I mentioned before, I have professional colleagues that don't do that.
Okay, in a case such as Terry Sanderson, how persistent do you believe his symptoms are, in your opinion?
Well, as of April 28, 2021, they had been persistent for 5 years. Now, after that period of time, I'm not a treating physician of his, so I can't comment on his clinical timeline after that.
One of the defendants, handpicked neuropsychologist Angela Eastfold, testifies, or in her report, discusses Terry's persistent concussive symptoms as being better accounted for by a history of comorbidities, risks, factors like hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, untreated obstructive sleep apnea. The list goes on, but I'm going to just start one at a time and ask you for each one. Do you think any of these things I'm going to list better account for Terry's persistent concussive symptoms? Hypertension.
No.
Hypercholesterolemia. I assume that's high cholesterol.
High cholesterol, hypercholesterolemia, no.
Sleep apnea.
No.
Prostate cancer.
No.
Erectile dysfunction.
No.
Restless leg syndrome.
No.
Migraine.
No.
Bilateral hearing loss.
No.
Chronic insomnia.
No.
So in your opinion, none of these things I just listed would account for any of the problems of persistent concussive symptoms that Terry Sanderson is suffering?
No. I mean, he did not have these symptoms before the accident, and certainly he had some of those medical conditions before.
That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, that means it's my turn, Dr. Boehm. Thanks
Yes,
for
sir. Yes, sir.
making time before trial here. As you know, because you've done this before, a big part of what I'm going to do is make sure I understand your opinions, and then if there's any point at which you've said something that differs from your deposition, then I might point that out. And I believe you have your deposition transcript with you, correct?
That is correct. I do.
Okay.
But could we have
And
the time we're beginning here, James?
Sure. 2:13 is what I have,
Thank you.
Mountain Time.
Yeah.
And so you have the transcript of the deposition that I took of you years ago, correct, in this case? Actually, I don't remember if it was multiple years, but it was a while back. June 21, 2021 is what I have.
That's correct. That's correct.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so I'm glad you have that with you. I have the exhibits to that, and I can pull those up if we need them.
I'll do that.
Okay, so let's start though with just some couple quick follow-up questions on your background and training experience. So one of them is just, has a court ever excluded your testimony from trial?
Not from trial, no. I mean, I had a motion of limine that we were going to have an evidentiary hearing on, but the case settled right after that, so we never had the evidentiary hearing.
Okay.
And that's all I'm aware of.
Okay. And then this is just a quick question about billing. We don't have to spend much time on it. I have
Sure.
your fee schedule, which is the document that describes what you charge for your work in this case. And you charge varying things for an exam or a deposition,
Right.
records review. But can you give me a sense of how much you've charged the plaintiffs to this point?
I think I've only charged my retainer, which was $4,000 a few years back. Now, I am charging $5,000 for the preparation and the testimony today. So that I have. Now, I don't know if I received that $5,000 yet. My administrator would know that, but I would expect that I've received $9,000 today.
Thank you. And then what about time spent? Do you know how many hours you've spent working on the case?
No, I just jot that down, and my rate changed last year. So before, when I was hired on this case, I was only charging like $400 an hour. So I would imagine I've spent clearly 10 to 15 hours for sure on this matter.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Have you ever worked as a biomechanics expert in snow sports science?
Snow sports science?
Yes.
No, no one's made themselves out as a snow sports science institution that actually hired me on something, but no.
Okay.
I would have to say no to that.
Okay. And speaking of such institutions, do you belong to any organizations that do work specifically in snow sports science?
No, I'm a member of the American Academy of Neurology, the Biomedical Engineering Society, and the Society of Automotive Engineers only.
I see. And have you ever performed research that focuses specifically on biomechanics as applied in snow sports like skiing?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't design skis.
Right. Okay. And I just want to make sure I understand the way you see your role in this case. At your deposition in 2021, you told me that, and I'll use your term, the main thrust of your testimony would be your biomechanics opinions. Do you remember that?
Or biomedical engineering opinions. Yes, I actually feel that way now.
Okay, great. So the term biomechanics, let's make sure we understand it because it's not one, at least that I use all the time. You just clarified it. When we're talking about your biomechanics opinions, we're talking about biomedical engineering. Is that right?
Right. Biomechanics falls under biomedical engineering. Okay, so just get that straight. And like I said, is a very wide-ranged field, and people are doing all kinds of research in all different aspects of the field. So biomechanics, keep in mind that biomechanical engineers tend to deal with inanimate objects for the most part, whereas biomedical engineers tend to deal with not only inanimate objects, but also with human.
Right, a human subject. Okay. So as you just said to me, you see your role as providing mainly those biomedical engineering.
I mean, the medical records gives us the diagnoses. I mean, his rib fractures have healed up. I mean, we know that. But he has this persistent concussive symptoms that we see throughout the medical records. My job wasn't to treat and diagnose him and come up with a treatment paradigm. My job was to determine how that happened. And I think I've pretty much put that out with obviously the information that I had available to come up with my opinions.
Right. And so I think you've already said this earlier in your testimony today, in terms of the neurological symptoms and the neuropsychological evaluations, you're happy to defer to the treaters in Mr. Sanderson's case.
Well, they're the ones that made the diagnosis. And so I find that after evaluating the patient, his history is consistent with medical records from which the diagnoses were made. So I'm not going to refute that he has a mild traumatic brain injury due to a persisting concussive symptomatology, or the fact that he had fractured ribs in the past that have since healed up. I'm not going to refute that at all. I would say that it is consistent with that. To me, the main thrust was, well, how did all that happen?
Right. And in terms of what does he need for treatment in the future, or whether his symptoms will persist in any degree in the future, you don't have opinions about that.
Objection, compound.
I defer.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make a general statement. I defer all future medical care and the cost thereof associated with that care to his treaters. So I have no opinions on his future medical care needs, nor do I have any opinions regarding the functionality, i.e. what he can and cannot do as a result of his diagnoses seen in the medical records, which I concur with. So I defer that to others.
Right, right. And how his symptoms will continue into the future, what the nature of them will be, that kind of thing.
That is correct. I mean, I defer that to his treaters or the overall long-term prognosis of his symptoms. So
Right.
Once again, I defer all of that to his treaters.
Okay. Another thing that I think you made clear in your deposition to me in 2021 that I just want to make clear here today is that you don't have any opinions about whether anyone was skiing unreasonably and caused the collision, correct?
Absolutely. I have no comments on how people were skiing, the density of the skiers, or how that they were conducting business that day, the day of the accident. No.
Right.
It
So
boils down to how, from an engineering standpoint or a biomedical engineering standpoint, how did he develop the symptoms that he has? That's reflected in the medical records.
Right. So in other words, you have opinions about the mechanics of the collision, but not who should be responsible for it.
I have no liability opinions in this matter.
So the answer to my question is yes. Is that
That
right?
is correct. I'm not pointing the finger. I'm just pointing to Newton's 3 laws of physics and the engineering calculations that are consistent, that give you the plausibility opinions that the fall in fact caused the clinical symptoms that Mr. Sanderson had.
Got it. Okay, and at the end of that 2021 deposition, you told me I've provided the opinions that I plan to provide at trial. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And as I hear it today, you haven't provided any new opinions that are in addition to what you provided during that deposition testimony, correct?
That is correct. I mean, and I read through, fortunately, I was provided my deposition just 2 days ago, so I read through it. And the last part of it, you did ask, were there any other opinions? And I said, no. And we covered it.
Okay. And you, at that time, when you provided those opinions, you'd said that you did not feel like you were missing any material that you needed to come to a confident conclusion. Is that right?
For my opinions only. Okay. Right. When you just consider my opinions, I had the necessary data that I needed. Now,
right.
If there's some other extenuating circumstance, i.e., he fell off the chairlift before all this happened, 20 feet to the ground, I would like to know that. And so, but I have no history of that. So unless there is some significant departure of the information that is provided to me, my opinions still stand true today as they did back in 2021.
Right. And in fact, in the deposition, you told me that you would let me know through plaintiff's counsel if you came across new information that affected your opinions, and you did not find such information.
I did. That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. Okay, I think you made this clear, but again, we're talking in a sort of strange way here to a jury that's not present, and it's hard for me to get a sense, are they following? So I apologize if I repeat some questions. But
no, go right ahead.
As I understand, you believe Mr. Sanderson is one of the rare patients who experiences concussive symptoms beyond 18 months. Is that right?
I wouldn't say rare. He's in the minority. Less than 5% fall under that category. So rare in medical terms is less than 0.1%, and that's based on pharmaceutical studies. So it's really not rare, but it's certainly in the minority.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. I was just using it in a kind of colloquial sense, but
understand.
But that's obviously a very small minority. 95 versus 5, obviously, it's a huge disparity.
20 to 1. 20 to 1.
Got it. Okay. And it seems like you base this opinion on the post-concussive syndrome. Is that okay to call it that?
Yes, syndrome is a compendium of symptoms.
Okay.
That's the definition of syndrome.
Okay, so maybe we could just say you base your opinion on the persistence of his concussive symptoms.
That is correct.
On testimony.
As far as it being permanent.
Right.
I mean,
okay.
He had a mild traumatic brain injury day one. The question becomes, is it permanent or not? Only time will tell. You see.
Right.
And then the medical records provide that timeline.
Right. And so you point to the medical records and then testimony from family members or friends that knew him before and after as the evidence supporting this post-concussive syndrome or persisting symptoms opinion that you have. Is that right?
And Mr. Sanderson, because I saw him.
Oh, correct. And your evaluation of him.
So that answer is yes, to include.
Okay. I believe in your deposition you said that you thought Mr. Sanderson's narcotic medication might have exacerbated his symptoms following the collision. Is that right?
Narcotic medications can definitely make, in layman's terms, anyone a little goofy, if you will. So you can certainly have exacerbations of certain behavioral elements, if you will, from narcotic use. It just depends. I would have to defer that to his treaters because they're the ones that prescribe that to him. And so they would have a working knowledge of how that medication was affecting him.
Okay. And then in your deposition, I think you said that you did not refer to the fMRI, not MRI, but fMRI in any, you didn't use that in formulating your opinions at all. Is that correct?
The F, the small f in front of the MRI means functional MRI. I do not use that in my practice, nor was I trained in that element, and therefore I don't use it in my practice, and I defer the use or any opinions from that device to others.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I want to go through, as plaintiff's counsel did, I want to go through and just make sure I have a good sense of what you reviewed to formulate your opinions for the deposition that I took. So I'm going to just go through those real quickly. So
And what page are you going on, my? I think, what, page 13, I think it is.
Sure, I'm trying to, I don't have it, I have kind of some notes here. I don't have the deposition transcript, but I can definitely, page 20 is where some of this occurs, and then
Page 14 has a lot of it too.
Sure, okay. And then page, or exhibit 3 to your deposition.
I don't have any of my exhibits.
Yeah, maybe I'll pull that up because that will make it more simple.
I think that would be helpful since I don't have.
Okay, so when you gave your opinions to me in that prior deposition, and as you said today, those are all the opinions that you have provided in your testimony.
There you go. Now, I do have that page, but if for some reason my copy does not have an exhibit sticker on it, but
that's okay.
And that's what I read into the record today. So I have that. Yes.
Great. So I'm just looking at that deposition section at the bottom, and it lists out the people whose testimony you had read in preparing your opinions.
That is correct.
And I'm just going to note a few names that are not on that list just for clarity's sake. So Terry Sanderson himself was deposed over multiple days. You did not read those transcripts, correct?
Not before that first deposition. That is correct.
Right. And you did not read Gwyneth Paltrow's deposition.
No, that is also correct.
And
I did not.
And then you didn't read Eric Christiansen's, the ski instructor who was at the scene of the collision, correct?
I don't know if I had that before or since, but he was. He reported that he wasn't an eyewitness to the event, so I can't tell you with certainty here. I'm looking at the deposition itself, and I'm seeing if I said that or not back then. I don't recall.
On page 20, I asked you, I said, you haven't read anything from Eric Christiansen, and you said, no, I have not.
Okay, then I hadn't then. Okay, so you found it in my deposition.
Yeah, great.
I don't have any direct recollection of that deposition, so I have to refer to the transcript.
That's fine. That's why we take the transcripts. And then another name that is not listed here is Carrie Oakes. She was another ski instructor who was at the scene. I don't see that she's listed here. So you did not read hers.
I don't recognize the name. No.
Right, okay. And then you did not read Brad Falchuk's, and he is Miss Paltrow's husband, who was also there that day of the collision.
No. I don't recognize that name either. So I'm sure I did not have that definition.
Okay. And then the same thing for the Miss Paltrow's children, who are Moses and Apple. They were there as well. You didn't read their depositions, correct?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. hadn't seen or read the comments Mr. Sanderson made at a press conference held about this case, correct?
No, I'm not aware of that, no.
And you had not read letters Terry Sanderson sent to Deer Valley Resort in August 2016, the year of the collision, correct?
No.
And so, therefore, you didn't compare his various statements about the accident to assess credibility or look for inconsistencies, that kind of thing. Is that correct?
I did not have that information to even analyze.
Right, okay. And the same thing for Mr. Craig Ramon, whose testimony you did read. His deposition transcript
Yes.
is listed there.
That is correct.
And you've referred to him as the eyewitness today, correct?
That is correct.
And
I mean, that's what was indicative of his testimony that he saw it, but I don't have any independent verification of that other than what he said in his deposition.
right. And did you compare the claims that he made in his deposition testimony to claims he made in a prior interview?
No.
Okay, and then,
I'm not aware of any prior.
okay, so you didn't do any special evaluation of his credibility, is that right?
I only had his deposition and that was it.
Okay. And
I
then,
mean, I assume since they're under oath, everyone's under oath, they're telling the truth.
oh, that's fair. I understand that if that's all you had, then you go
That's all
by
I
it.
had, yes.
Yeah, and you were not aware, I believe, at your deposition that multiple witnesses had testified that Mr. Sanderson had not lost consciousness. Is that correct?
I haven't read any other witness statements.
Okay, so you weren't aware of those testimonies, correct?
No,
Okay.
that is correct.
And then I guess at the time of the deposition, you hadn't read any opinions from defendants experts. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. They were not available then.
Okay. But despite having not read those, the various things we've went through just now, you felt confident providing opinions because you based those opinions primarily on your physics application, right? Your application of the
correct.
laws
And
of
my,
physics.
and my understanding. Someone speaking?
Yes, doctor, please wait for his whole question to get out. You keep cutting him off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought his question was over, so
Yeah.
And also, please wait for me to just insert an objection, so a short pause would help.
Right, yeah, and I apologize, Dr. Boehm. It's probably clear that where I'm going, and it takes me a while to get there, so just
I
thanks.
understand. And you're going to have to repeat that question again now.
Right, let's see. Oh, I was saying, despite the fact that you had not read the various things we've just gone over, you felt confident offering opinions about the mechanism of the accident because of your application of the principles of physics, basically.
Physics, engineering, from a biomedical standpoint, and understanding the human anatomy. Yes, that would be correct.
Right. And the main piece of objective evidence that you're using there to apply the principles of physics to get your answer is the rib images or the fractures that you see in the rib x-ray. Is that right?
That is correct. In fact, I made the comment, if those weren't present, I couldn't tell you how the accident occurred, because then we're just dealing with the closed head injury only. And that could have occurred any number of ways.
I see. And I believe from your deposition, I saw that it's your understanding that Mr. Sanderson initially thought he had caused the accident. Is that correct?
Something like that. Yeah. I think that I read somewhere around there that he thought that he may have caused the accident. Now, I don't know how, but certainly that's what he was saying. But then again, in a state of confusion or disorientation, who knows what someone is going to say. But I did note that.
And there are a couple other materials that I didn't ask you, I didn't point out here that you had not read. One of them was the deposition of Michael McMahon, the medical provider who treated Mr. Sanderson in the urgent care on the day of the collision. You hadn't read his deposition, is that correct?
That is correct.
These are things I don't believe were clearly addressed in your deposition, but I wanted to clarify
Sure.
in case you had opinions on these. Were you aware that Mr. Sanderson testified that there was an unnamed woman skier that he worried about hitting just prior to the collision?
I wasn't aware of that, no.
And were you aware that he has claimed that the impact of the collision caused him to go airborne?
I think he may have said that, but I can tell you from a physics standpoint that that did not happen. I mean, airborne in that he fell down, I guess you can technically say you're airborne, but it's not like he was propulsed into the air from the ground, like doing a ski jump. That did not happen.
I see. So, Mr. Ramon, you've given testimony today, and you did in your deposition, that, in your opinion, the force had to be from Ms. Paltrow had to be from the left side, from the back. Is that correct?
Yes, it had to drive. I mean, I'm not talking about directly from the left side, but it had to have a Y component to drive him to the right side. And that's
okay. So
it had to have been from the left. There had to have been a left to right component force application to cause this.
But you're aware, correct, that Mr. Ramon claims that Ms. Paltrow hit Mr. Sanderson squarely in the back?
I think that's from what I recall, but once again, if he's standing to the side, he wouldn't know exactly how it is. But keep in mind that our center of gravity is right down the center line of our torso. And if there's any Y component to the right, it's going to drive you to the right. And if it's enough to drive that center of gravity outside of your torso, you're going to fall. So it may appear to an observer that someone's being hit directly from behind, but in fact, there is a Y component to the force application.
I see. Were you aware that Mr. Sanderson reported to his primary care provider a few weeks before the collision that he felt like he was getting old all of a sudden? That's the quote from a medical record.
I don't recall that, but
you don't dispute it, I sense.
I'm not going to dispute that. I mean, a lot of people his age do say that. They say it to my face in my clinic. And I don't have a medication for that.
I understand. I'm sure everyone wishes you did.
Oh, well, I wouldn't be here if I did.
Were you aware of Mr. Sanderson's vision problems when you formulated your opinions in this case?
Yes, I do believe he had some vision problems. And once again, being hit from behind, obviously the vision is, you don't have vision at the back of your head. But suffice it to say, like when I was going through the different scenarios, I determined that he was struck from behind. So his visual acuity would not come into play in that analysis.
However, that visual acuity was connected to a 2009 event that was the cause of some MRIs that he received or underwent. Do you recall that?
He underwent,
Misstates prior test, misstates facts.
he underwent cranial imaging back in 2009 for an evaluation. So now I don't know what the working diagnosis was at that time. It could have involved vision, but I don't have any recollection.
I see. And I should stop sharing this page, but it is because I think we're done with it. But
Oh, there you go.
Oh, sorry. Did you?
No, I recognize all those sheets.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay. I'm just going up to this first part of Exhibit 3, which is your handwritten notes, I believe,
Yes.
from the evaluation that you performed on Mr. Sanderson.
That is correct. That is correct.
And here, you note that if I can find it, I'll look here. I apologize. I can't evaluate your.
I remember my notes, so just ask me.
Right. Well, I was just going to say I can't browse them probably as quickly as you can, but the first point here under the, I assume this is kind of a patient history, correct?
Yeah, the PTH is past traumatic history. PMH is past medical history.
Got it. Okay. And so the past, let's start with the past medical history.
Right. Okay.
You mentioned here, I believe, that he had some experience with migraines, correct?
That is correct.
But you don't note that he'd had a stroke-like event or a TIA type event here that I can see. It might be that I'm missing it.
No, he was, that would have been in his patient intake form, and let's see what he had on that. And he did circle the stroke, which was a TIA. And basically, I wrote, now here's that sheet right here. And
Yeah, I can find that.
I made some notes to that. And basically, what he described was an ophthalmologic, layman's terms, eyeball migraine.
Okay, and I'm trying to figure. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's what that was. And I see patients for that actually quite frequently. And that does necessitate some cranial imaging just to make sure that you're not dealing with a stroke. But certainly he had a, there you go, an ophthalmologic migraine versus a central retinal artery TIA. So the description, when you have a stroke, you tend to lose something, so we call that negative phenomena. A migraine is associated with positive phenomena, i.e. you see the lights and everything. Some individuals will have a neutral phenomena, and you can't tell if it's a central retinal artery TIA or an ophthalmologic migraine, and that's why he underwent the workup.
I see. Okay. And this is just for the record, is page 20 of Exhibit 3 to your deposition. And this is, as you called it, I think, an intake form where he's kind of circling various medical conditions that he's had in his history, and then you put some notes on top of that.
That is correct. I reviewed that with him, and I made some extraneous remarks besides some of the circled items on that list.
Okay, so you were aware that in 2009 he had this neurological event that required some evaluation by MRI and other treatment.
That is correct. And keep in mind, a TIA is not indicative of brain damage. You see what I'm saying? It was a transient ischemic attack, which resulted in no damage to the brain.
Okay, and so in your opinion, was the vision problem that he had, it's not connected to this 2009 event?
Say again, repeat that again.
Yeah, sorry, I could ask that with more clarity. In your opinion, does Mr. Sanderson's vision problem that he's had over the years relate back to this 2009 workup?
Probably not, because that was a transient event that got his attention, and he reported it to his healthcare providers, who submitted him to a workup.
Okay, so let's go back to the, sorry to scroll like this, it's kind of dizzying, but I just want to be quick here. I know
Sure.
you got things to move to. So if we go to that first section that you described as the traumatic history for Mr.
Right.
Sanderson, I note that there is a mention of a closed head injury. I believe that's what CHI stands for.
That is correct.
And he had that.
I'd like to clarify the record a little bit for you. I see the brackets before and after. That's before the ski accident and then after the ski accident. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that out to you. So I did get that kind of history from him. So go ahead.
Okay, got it. And it looks like he had a closed head injury at age 10, correct?
That is correct. That's what he reported to me.
Okay. But as I recall from your deposition, he did not tell you about a fall that had occurred after the accident, and that would have, I guess, been put in this after section of this history. Is that right?
That is correct. He did not report a fall, but then again, the way I asked the question, had you been exposed to any traumatic events requiring medical care? And so if he received medical care, then his reporting would have been in error. But if he did not receive medical care for that incident, then he was correct in his report.
Okay. And in his testimony, he described this fall as causing he hit his head and it caused a roughly 45 minutes period of loss of consciousness. Is that typically something that would require medical care?
Objection, assumes facts not in evidence.
I would think so, if someone was knocked out. Now, obviously, if it was just him there and he reported that, then the question is, how do you know it was 45 minutes? And then he may have said, well, I'm okay, and he didn't seek care. But if something like that, if it were witnessed, I would imagine they would be dialing 911.
Okay. So it seems like in your evaluation of him, he denied having any significant brain-related event or treatment before the accident, aside from, I guess, that closed head injury at age 10. Is that right?
Correct. That is correct.
And then he denied having any similar events after the accident.
That is also correct.
Okay, I'll stop sharing this for a second, and we may need to go back to it, but I want to get to this set of questions I have about your biomechanics opinions.
Sure. Mr. Sorensen.
In particular, as you...
Sounds like we're moving on to another subject, so let's take a short recess. The jury's on its way back. Yeah, do you want to let the lawyers know? Mr. Sorensen?
Wayne, do you believe that your account of the accident is the only possible account, not just that it's the most probable, but it's the only possible account, correct?
Given the set of facts that were given to me and the nature of the injuries that he sustained, that would be correct.
And the basic opinions are, one, Mr. Sanderson was hit in the back from the left, and two, some of his ribs fractured on his elbow as he hit the ground. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
And so you took that information about the rib fractures and performed calculations with a few assumptions. Is that right?
The assumption was that he fell, which we know he did, so I guess that's not an assumption. And then I knew his anthropomorphic measurements, which gives you the force calculation. So there really wasn't much in the way of assumptions. It's basically classical physics at that point.
Okay, well, one assumption that I noted was just, for example, and I'll just use your term,
Sure.
you said you guesstimated that Miss Paltrow weighed 130 pounds, for example.
Yes, yeah, that is correct. And I don't want to be insulting if she weighs more. So I just said 130 pounds, and I think that was a reasonable guesstimate. Obviously, if she weighed any more than that, then the calculation would be more and more severe, if you will.
Okay. And then you also performed, as you explained to me in your deposition, you performed a calculation that assumed that Miss Paltrow was hit by Mr. Sanderson. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct.
And you ruled that out because you would expect the rib fracture to be in a different place if that had occurred. Is that right?
Not only that, but the force application is just not enough.
Oh, well, in your deposition, you said that, I'll just read it here, it's on page 32. You said, if that was enough force to do it, which that's borderline, so you seem to acknowledge that it might be enough. I actually did the calculation. You'd expect the rib fracture to be in the anterior chest, not the posterior.
And that is also correct. The location is really the telltale sign. But I also did some calculations on how fast he would have had to be going and striking her at a dead stop and that kind of stuff as well. So once again, hitting her from behind is not going to give you the fracture location that we see in the medical records. Okay, but I just want to make sure I understand this part of your deposition testimony then. It says, if that was enough force, Mr. Sanderson hitting Miss Paltrow from behind, right, and then falling that way, you said that that's
borderline, that, and as I understood it, that meant that that might be enough force to do it. It's borderline. It might not be.
And because I don't know how fast they were skiing.
Okay, right. Okay, that's helpful. And then you, in terms of the calculations you're talking about here, some of the other scenarios that you're ruling out, as I understand it, the pages you provided to us that have the calculations,
Yes.
I don't recall any of those having the calculations that you're referring to. Do those
Like
pages contain? So like when you said I did a calculation about when Mr. Sanderson hit Miss Paltrow, if you assume that scenario.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, that's, he would have had to been going pretty fast on his skis. And then again, that would have brought in the assumption of how fast he was going. And I don't think anyone can give you that number.
Okay, so in other words, if we go to these calculations again in exhibit 3 of your
That's for the
deposition,
head. That's for the head.
right, and these calculations do not include the ones that you're referring to where you're ruling out certain possibilities. Is that right?
No, that is for, yeah, this is, yeah, for the head, I wanted to make sure that it was greater than 100 newtons of impact force. And so I did that for the head. And then for the ribs, I wanted to make sure that we were in the vicinity of 4,000 newtons, which we were. So I wanted to make sure that the force magnet, I mean, we know he fell to the ground. We just wanted to know what the magnitude of the force application was in doing so, and is it enough to do that? And the answer is yes.
Okay. So the calculations about the other scenarios you ruled out, did you write those down on some other pages somewhere else?
No.
Or did you just do them in your head?
Yeah, I mean, once I had these calculations here, because I was thinking about the different scenarios, then it became a speed issue or a kinetic energy issue. And so one of the things I did not have was the skiers' initial speeds at the time of impact, either way.
I see. Another thing that you assumed, well, sorry, as we're here, just it will be more efficient. These calculations, we haven't gone over them, and I'm not going to ask you to go through them in detail. I'm certainly no expert on these particular equations, but these are the equations you've used to provide or to make the conclusions that you've provided today. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll stop sharing this again. Maybe we'll go back to it. But one thing that I did hear you say today that seemed to be inconsistent with something you'd said in your deposition was that the skis, you said today that I think that the skis stayed on both skiers during the collision, but as I understand your deposition, I understand your deposition testimony to mean that, or to say that the skis actually came off. Do you remember that?
No, I mean, the skis, I mean, that's just from the rotational analysis that I did. You would expect, but you just don't know how tight the strappings are on those skis, and that's another assumption that you would have to make. And so really, whether or not the skis stayed on or not really didn't play into the analysis.
Okay, so I want to be fair to you, so I'm going to, I'll point you to page 31 of your deposition transcript. And you say there, obviously the skis came off because of the bindings. And
I'm looking.
It's at the bottom. Page 31, right?
Yeah, he would twist and fall down. Right. I mean, for some reason, I thought the skis came off. So, and I wasn't there, so I don't know. But certainly, skis coming on or off is not going to impact the calculations on the ribs or the head.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay, I'm getting close, I think, to the end of my questions here.
Sure.
Thank you for your patience with them. So another thing I wanted to ask is about imaging.
Sure.
I understand it that you did review the actual MRI images from an October 2017 MRI that Mr. Sanderson underwent. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and you noted in those images that there was disease associated with aging, correct?
Oh, yeah, and he also had a history of migraine headaches, so you're going to see extraneous white matter findings in the subcortex, which you do see. I also noted the enlarged ventricles and the atrophic changes seen. I really did not have any criticisms of the interpreting radiologist's findings on that study.
Okay, got it. But you didn't review the imaging taken in an MRI of 2009. We already kind of mentioned that workup, correct? You didn't see those images.
No, I did not.
And then you haven't looked at Dr. Gibby's 2021, March 2021, so it was done before your deposition. You've not looked at those images.
That was
correct?
the functional MRI, and that's a different beast altogether, so I don't interpret those.
Right, so actually there was a functional, but there was also a straight MRI, and
I did not see that, no.
Okay, got it. Okay, I just wanted to make sure on what you had reviewed imaging-wise.
Sure.
In terms of this issue about whether a neurologist, what limitations, what reliability issues there might be with a neurologist providing opinions about a patient that he or she has not actually evaluated personally, I wanted to ask whether you know about the legal rules about how a plaintiff's expert, or sorry, a defense expert might be able to evaluate a plaintiff. You don't know anything about that, correct?
Well, yes, like in the form of compulsory medical examinations?
Sure.
Yeah, I do that actually quite frequently. And once again, when I get involved in defense matters, I typically do not provide any medical opinions on patients that I have not evaluated myself personally. Now, if I've done the CME on them, then I'm in a position to do so. But that's just been my personal preference over the years. And certainly I get hired to provide engineering opinions, and you don't necessarily need to see the patient for engineering opinions, because engineering opinions are plausible in nature, and you can't make medical causation opinions from an engineering standpoint.
Okay, so maybe I should ask my question more pointedly. I mean, you don't have any knowledge about whether there was an opportunity for Dr. Hesh to have an examination?
No, I have no idea on that, and I have no opinion on that as well. So
Okay.
that would be between you guys and the experts.
Okay, and then, and as you said, you have colleagues who I assume you respect and trust who don't perform these expert roles in the same way you do, where you
That is correct.
They don't insist on an evaluation, in other words.
That is correct. I just tend to be more detailed in that vernacular, if you will. That's just the way I've always been.
Covered a lot of these things already. I'm just going through my last bit of notes.
Sure.
Make sure we've gotten it all. Oh, there was some discussion of this disorientation note that Whitney Smith, the ski patroller, put on a plaintiff's exhibit. Let's see, I think it's exhibit 1, yes. Page 2, do you remember that?
I do.
I don't have that right in front of me. I don't know if you can share that, Lawrence. Is that something you could share again?
You're
quickly?
talking about this?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. Page 2, there's a section that says, what did you do? And Lawrence had you actually read it out. Do you remember that?
That is correct.
Would you like me to share that?
Yeah, that would be helpful, Lawrence, if you would. Thank you.
You just have to buy Bob a Coke Slurpee.
Okay. I don't think that'll break the bank. Happy to get you one, Bob.
That's a health food, you know.
Oh, don't do it.
So while Lawrence is pulling that up, I'll just ask you, as I believe you testified earlier, your opinion is that this note about disorientation, you read that to be indicative of loss of consciousness. Is that right?
Disorientation or indicative of a concussion.
Okay, so if you go down, Lawrence, to the second page, there's right there in the middle, there's this assessment says, what did you do?
Yeah.
Assessment, mild disorientation. And as I heard you earlier, you said that this is indicative that he lost consciousness, but maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, I mean, disorientation, keep in mind, or consciousness is volitional interaction with your environment. If you're disoriented, you don't have that. So it's really technically a interruption of consciousness for that individual. You don't necessarily have to have your eyes closed, but certainly it is a symptom of concussion.
I see. So as a layperson, I would expect someone like Whitney Smith to write out loss of consciousness if there was someone that actually completely, closed their eyes, they're blacked out.
Yeah, you don't have to have your eyes completely closed, blacked out to call it a loss of consciousness. I can't tell you the number of times on a Sunday afternoon, a football player would be hit in the head, and he's just standing out there not doing anything. We immediately know there's something wrong, and we run out there and we say, "How are you doing?" And then he calls me his mom, and we know that that's a lot. Then we bring him onto the side, and we know that that is a loss of consciousness. Clearly, disorientation, to whatever degree, is indicative of not having volitional consciousness with your environment.
Okay. So, but if we were to distinguish that kind of disorientation from being completely knocked out, as the conventional or colloquial term might be, you're talking about two different things there, correct?
Well, consciousness is consciousness. Keep in mind, there's different levels of consciousness. Alcohol is one level, disorientation is another, okay?
Right.
And I mean, you can see that in the boxing ring, if you will.
Yeah, right. No, that is all perfectly clear. I just want to make sure that we're clear about what you're saying this mild disorientation mean. You're not saying, I take it, that this means he was knocked out for 5 minutes.
No. I'm not saying that he was knocked out cold, no.
Right, okay. And I just want to point this out because I believe it was read incorrectly. I don't mean that you were intending to read it incorrectly, but I just want to make it clear at the second part of that section, it says reassessment, disorientation lessened. So you had said he still had it, but I just wanted to note it was lessened.
Yeah.
And you see that, correct?
Well, because of the pictures of you guys on my screen, that's blocked out, lessened.
Oh, got it. I see. So I see.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. It had lessened. There you go.
Okay.
I see it now.
Right. Okay, got it. I just wanted to make sure you saw that. And
Sure.
if you also go to the first page, if you would, Lawrence, there is a note, sorry, maybe a little bit down from there, Lawrence. Yeah, there you go. So there's a section that says possible injury. Do you see that? It's under the injured.
Yes, possible injury, and you're going to have to move it over to the left just a little bit because it says other.
Okay, right. So there's one X on fracture, as you see there, and I take it that means the rib fracture is.
That is correct. Right rib fracture.
But then, and there's one on strain or sprain, but there's not an X on concussion. Do you see that?
That is correct.
And do you have any opinion as to why that wouldn't be X'd out there?
No, I didn't complete the form, so I don't know why.
Right, okay. And I think in your deposition testimony, I asked you this, but I'll ask you it again just to make sure I understand your testimony on it. There's various claims about Mr. Sanderson's loss of consciousness, how long it lasted in the record. Did you see that he described his loss of consciousness in different ways at different times?
I think that is possible. I mean, certainly he described the loss of consciousness, but I think there was 3, 5 minutes. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't completely consistent all the way through, but except for the loss of consciousness.
Right, and even in some of the records plaintiff's counsel showed you today, there was, the early on, like in this document, right after the collision, there's no discussion of how long he had lost consciousness or that he had lost full consciousness. But then later there's a progress note that says loss of consciousness for approximately 5 minutes. You read that earlier. It's the next day. Do you recall that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you did note that there were some differing reports about that loss of consciousness, correct?
About the time, yes.
Right. And so in I take it you don't have any specific opinion about exactly how long he lost consciousness or whether he was knocked totally out, anything like that. Is that right?
No, that is correct. He just had a loss of consciousness and that's it.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm done. Let me look through one more page here.
Certainly.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, you can stop sharing, Mr. Bueller. Thank you. I've been calling you Lawrence, but I don't mean to be casual.
You can
Mr.
call me.
Bueller.
You can be casual, James, if I can be casual with you.
Okay.
May we take a short break, Doctor?
Yeah, I'm actually done. So
Thank you very much, Mr. Egan. And yes, a break is welcome.
I'd say 5 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Going off record, the time is 3:13. Okay, we're back on record. The time is 3:24. And did you want to make your announcement, Lawrence?
Thank you, Dr. Bain.
Thank you, sir. And I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bain.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, this concludes it. The time is 3:25.
Thank you, Mr. Sorensen. Mr. Sykes, are you ready for your next witness?
Yes, we are.
You may proceed.
We will go ahead. We will call Mark Harris.
Thank you.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give in the case now before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You can have a seat.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Would you start by stating your full name and spelling it all?
Yeah, it's Mark Stephen Harris. Mark with a K. Stephen, P-H-E-N is the way it's spelled. And Harris is H-E-R-A-T-H. Thank you.
Hey, Mark. I'm Peter Sorensen. I haven't had a chance to stand up before the jury yet, so I'm introducing myself to them, but also to you.
Okay.
Why don't we start off by you telling us a little bit about your education. So where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school in Bogota, Colombia, a school named Colegio Nueva Granada. And I was there because my dad was a diplomat. And I graduated from there, and then I went to college in Colorado.
And you anticipated where I was going. What college in Colorado?
Western State College in Gunnison, Colorado.
And what degree did you attain from?
History, political science.
Okay. And then after that, what is kind of your work background? What did you do after college?
After college, I worked a couple odd jobs in Denver, and then I put a package in with the Navy and got hired to fly in the Navy.
So you're a Navy pilot?
I was a Navy pilot for 15 years, yes.
Okay, and what aircraft did you fly?
I flew the A6 Intruder, which is no longer with us. It was decommissioned. It's an attack airplane, and I flew later on I transitioned to the Guard and flew the F-16.
This isn't really relevant, but what was your favorite to fly?
I loved them both.
Okay. Are you married?
I am.
Okay. And where do you live?
Well, we bounce around a little bit because obviously I'm here in Salt Lake because I love to ski.
Yeah.
But we have a summer place up in White Salmon, Washington. We're residents of Washington, and we have a house in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay. So you kind of split time between the three places here.
Best of three places, yes.
There you go. And we're here today because we're talking about a ski collision involving Terry Sanderson on February 26th of 2016. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So let's give a little bit of background. How did you first come to know Terry?
I came to know Terry because my brother married Shay, and that was around I think it was October 2004 they got married, and soon after that I met Terry. And I'd already been coming to Salt Lake, so it was a natural thing when my brother came to town that I met him that way.
Gotcha. So you are Terry Sanderson's, this might get a little confusing, his son-in-law's brother.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And so how long have you known Terry?
Over 15 years.
Okay. And over those 15 years, how did your relationship develop?
Well, we started, I met him because my brother and I and one of my sisters used to come skiing. And so then we started actually staying at Terry's because it made sense. And then he was gracious enough to allow me to, because I used to be a storm chaser, to come and stay at his house. So it grew through skiing because we used to ski together as well.
Gotcha. So as sort of storms would come in, you have, because of your occupation, you could fly in.
That's correct.
That's a nice life. How many days roughly in that time period, that 2016, 2015 time period, were you skiing a year?
It would depend on the storms and stuff, but I would say somewhere between 25 to 30 days of skiing at that point, a year.
And how would you rank yourself as far as your ski level goes?
Fairly advanced.
Okay. And in the times you got to come in and stay with Terry, did your family get to know Terry as well?
So my son, who also flies in the Navy, when he was 12, I brought him here for what I call his powder qualification trip. And that was about the same time that I'd met Terry. So soon after that, we started seeing him and I at his house. And so Terry knows my son, he knows my daughter, and he knows my wife really well.
And what do your son and daughter call Terry?
My son calls him Uncle Terry because my son decided to go to the University of Utah, and so he would spend a lot of time with Terry.
Gotcha. So he came to know Terry too?
Very well.
And so is it fair to say that Terry treated you as family?
Absolutely.
You guys had a loving relationship?
Yes.
And as far as you know, that feeling was mutual?
Yes, it was.
Okay. You've already described some of the skiing that you do. I assume, did you go with Terry when he was skiing, or when you went skiing, did you bring Terry with you?
So when I knew Terry back before the accident, he had a meetup group that he met with a lot, and it was primarily at Alta, if my recollection serves me. But I'm more of I ski both mountains, so some days I would ski with him, some days I wouldn't. But I've skied with him at Alta, Snowbird, and other places as well.
Gotcha. So in that time you've skied with him, did you get a chance to see his skiing level?
Yes, I did.
And how would you rate that?
Advanced to intermediate.
Did you ever notice him did you ever see him get in an accident or have any collision or crash?
I did not.
Describe Terry's personality a little bit for us before the accident in that time period of 2014-15.
Before the accident, very outgoing, loved a good conversation, very conversational. Just really enjoyed being around people. So, I mean, he had the meetup group that he did. He'd go out and go dancing. So he's very, very, very active. Go to concerts, stuff like that.
Did you ever do any of those events with him or participate in any of those activities?
I was too busy skiing.
That's fair. So you found him to be intelligent?
Absolutely. Intelligent, witty, sharp, always interested in what you were doing and asking questions about what was going on in your life.
So he's interested in you?
Yes.
Were you ever present at his house when he was having any sort of parties or social gatherings?
I wouldn't call them parties. Maybe like he's a big basketball fan. March Madness, really big on that. In fact, I know he has a group of guys that they used to go to March Madness games.
So they travel to go see the
travel to see March Madness games, and so he enjoyed watching football. So you might have 3 or 4 people over the house, but I wouldn't call it a party.
Gotcha. So you'd watch the games with him and just
Right.
gather together. Have a barbecue or something like that?
Right.
Gotcha. In those times, did you see Terry being social and interacting with these friends and people?
Oh, absolutely. He was completely social. That was one of his strong suits.
Roughly how many days before the accident do you think you spent staying at Terry Sanderson's house?
Well, if you do just basic math, it's got to be somewhere over 50. Yeah.
So you got to observe him from kind of sun up to sundown when you weren't skiing.
Absolutely.
And you got to know him pretty well.
I did.
Would you say it was a pretty close friendship?
I would.
Did you ever worry about Terry when you went skiing with him?
I did not. It was clear to me that he had been quite the athlete when he was younger, because he was a very strong skier.
Did he ever tell you about any of his younger athletics?
He did not.
But you saw him to be very capable of anything that the mountain
Yes.
would throw at him.
Yes.
And prior to the accident, did you ever see Terry being forgetful?
No.
When you guys went packing up? When you guys packed up to go skiing, did you ever see Terry forget anything that he needed to go skiing that day?
I have no recollection of that, but we all forget stuff when we go up the mountain.
But he could make do if he did forget.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nothing like that stands out to you, though.
No, it does not.
We back up just a little bit. You've got, and I mentioned it kind of in passing, but what do you currently do for employment?
I currently work for FedEx as a pilot.
So you retired from the military and now you're working for
That's
FedEx.
correct.
And so you're able to come in and chase those storms, as he said earlier.
It's one of the benefits, yes.
Gotcha. You were not with Terry skiing that day when he was...
I was not.
Okay. How did you first come to hear about the ski collision?
I actually got a call from Terry that evening. He told me he'd been in an accident, didn't give any details at that point, and just was concerned about how he was going to get back from Park City. And then I didn't hear back from him, so I have at that point, I had no idea. I still don't know how he got back to, who brought him back down the mountain.
So he was confused when he called you about how he was even going to get home.
He had no idea.
Did you offer any suggestions?
Well, I was pretty convinced at that point I was going to get another call and to come up and, help him out, but I didn't.
Do you recall him asking you to be at the ready or to be ready to come help him?
I don't recollect the exact verbiage. He may have said, I might need a ride, but yeah. I just was kind of anticipating that might be the case.
And was it a long phone call or was it relatively
Very short.
Yeah. Just kind of informing you about the accident and that he might need a ride home?
That's correct.
Do you recall him telling you anything about his injuries?
Not at that point.
And you didn't hear again from him that day?
That's correct.
When did you next hear from Terry?
It was the following day.
Okay. And did he describe anything to you in that phone conversation that sticks out to you?
Yeah, he said he'd gotten, had heard a scream and got hit by behind, and had fallen face forward and gone unconscious on the snow, and then had to be removed from the slope in a toboggan.
What was your reaction when you had heard how he had kind of characterized things?
Say that again, please.
What was your reaction to hearing how he had characterized what had happened?
Well, collisions are in my opinion, the biggest risk we take on the mountain, so being hit on the mountain doesn't surprise me at all.
Did it surprise you that he had injuries from this?
No, that doesn't surprise me at all. It surprises me that what he had said at that point in time was that Gwyneth Paltrow hit him, and that kind of, okay, and then that she and whoever she was skiing with left the scene of the accident. That's what surprised me.
And why would that surprise you?
Your Honor, that's double hearsay. Now, how he knew, how Terry knew that had happened, double hearsay.
Overruled. Go ahead.
I think he's just describing his memory. And why would that bit of information surprise you?
Well, because my roommate in college's mom got hit on the slopes, and the kid tried to escape, and they chased him down. And in Colorado, I don't know the law in Utah or Colorado right now, but it's like a hit and run. And so it's a serious offense, and it's just something you just don't do.
Your Honor, can we approach the bench?
Sure. No problem, sir.
So members of the jury, there's no claim in this lawsuit based on a so-called hit and run. There is no claim before the jury based on a theory of hit and run. And the witness should refrain from using that terminology. The term is stricken from the record, and the jury should ignore the witness's use of that term. Thank you.
Let's move on a little bit. Did you ever notice that Terry had problems with his eyesight?
Yeah, I was aware of, he had some problems with one eye.
Okay. Did you ever see that that affected his skiing at all?
Negative.
Did you ever witness him making decisions on what days to ski based on his eyesight?
Well, I think he preferred to ski on nicer days like we all do.
Sure.
Yeah, because visibility can be challenging for anybody.
Gotcha. But you never saw, for instance, a time where he said, I'm not going to go up today because
No.
of my eyesight. Okay. So going back a little bit, when Terry finally did describe what happened to you, or what happened to him, excuse me, to you, did he ever tell you that he lost consciousness?
He did.
Okay. Did he ever tell you that, and I think you said this already, but that he was taken off the mountain in a toboggan?
He did.
When he spoke to you a little while after this accident, did he tell you that he was sore, that he was still having pain?
Absolutely.
Where did he describe that pain, if you recall?
Well, he had some broken ribs, so main torso area.
Gotcha. And did you see him, or what? Excuse me. And when was the next time you actually physically saw him?
That's a very good question. My recollection, it probably would have been within 2 weeks of the accident.
Okay, so not
immediately.
Immediate, but
no.
Close. And when you saw him next, did you notice anything physically different about Terry?
Not so much physical, other than walking slower and stuff, but mentally for sure.
Okay, and what did you see that was mentally different?
Just slower, trying to digest stuff in conversation and stuff, and decision-making type stuff.
So in just 2 weeks or so, in between the last time you had seen him, you saw noticeable difference in his cognition, his ability to think.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you notice any other differences in that time you saw him?
Well, he'd lost his some of his motivation and excitement for. I mean, he's recovering from a major accident, so he was moving slower, less motivated, less excited, less enthusiastic.
Gotcha. And did he describe that he was feeling different at that time to you?
Yeah, he was. He knew he didn't have his full faculties at that point.
Gotcha. And how did he describe those things to you? How did he convey that information to you?
Well, he said that he'd start doing something, for example, like an easy task, and then just kind of stop and go, well, why did I come over to this part of the kitchen or the house? So he was having issues with memory.
Gotcha. And when you saw him, was Carlene Davidson there?
No, she was not.
So this was after Carlene had left and he was having these kind of troubles.
Yes.
After the accident, has your relationship with Terry changed?
It has. We had a very strong relationship, and I was actually staying at his house for prolonged periods through 2015, but it just so happened that we had made a transition for the 2016 season, so I was actually not staying at Terry's at that point.
Gotcha.
So that, so I wasn't seeing him as much or doing as much with him.
Would you still keep in contact with him though?
Absolutely. I would, going from Arizona to Washington back and forth, I always stopped and stayed at his place in the fall and spring.
Just to check in and keep the friendship going?
Right, and I also go out to dinner with him on a regular basis.
And when you checked in the next time, and we're talking now after that 2-week visit that you had seen him. Following that, what changes did you see in Terry?
The biggest changes I saw is in conversation. Like I said before, you know, he was a great conversationalist, and it became difficult because his comprehension had gone down. You get confused. You know, you start talking to him, and he thought you were talking about maybe someone else, and then you realize that he wasn't following the direction of the conversation. So confused, comprehension, and then, you know, after a few instances like that, you could tell he was getting frustrated with that.
And so did he show little signs of frustration
Yes.
or anger? And how would that manifest that you saw?
You could just see it, you know, on it. He just kind of shake his head and then try to get back into the conversation.
Did you ever witness that he was more depressed?
I didn't actually witness that he was more depressed, but I witnessed that it was like a day and night as far as before and after the accident. He wasn't going, to my knowledge, he hasn't skied. I think he tried to go skiing a couple of times, but he hasn't skied really since the accident. I can't speak to going out and dancing, but it doesn't sound like he's been nearly as active. So.
But you have not skied with him since the incident?
I have not.
Have you ever talked about skiing with him?
I talked to him the first year after skiing, after his accident, about skiing. But it was clear to me that that was kind of a dead-end road at that point.
Just because he wasn't interested in it, or?
He wasn't mentally prepared to ski again. You know.
Did he ever describe to you how, you said you think he may have gone a couple times after the incident. Did he ever describe to you how those times went for him?
No, he didn't.
Did you ever see him be more paranoid after the accident?
Yes.
Describe that for us. Tell the
Well,
truth.
very basically, he, visiting his house, coming through on our trips to the north and back to the south, all of a sudden there were cameras in the house, multiple cameras in the house, and it was clear that he was videotaping both, you know, visual and audio, and it was just, I found it to be unusual and a little disturbing, you know, from my end.
Gotcha. So he didn't have those cameras in the house before?
No.
Did you ever see him be have problems with headaches or dizziness?
I didn't witness that.
Do you ever say that he was having those problems to you?
I can't recollect that he's ever said it to me.
I think earlier you said that you felt like his motivation had changed. Can you describe what that meant to you?
Yeah, basically it's motivation to, you know, you get up in the morning and have a hard time getting motivated to get going and get any basic stuff done, or in his case, go out and do stuff socially.
I think the jury's heard testimony that Terry was kind of and this is my term, but kind of a fiery guy before. He was high energy.
Very high energy, yeah.
Was that the same after the accident?
Negative.
Did you ever hear, and it's been brought up a lot, and it'll continue to be brought up, but did you ever hear anything about a GoPro video of this event?
No, I did not.
Has Terry ever said anything about that to you?
He has not.
So to your knowledge, there's never been a GoPro video of this event?
That's correct. To my knowledge, there isn't.
So just to recap, you would say that this ski accident has greatly impacted yours and Terry's relationship. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How so?
It's not enjoyable to be around Terry like it used to be. He just, because of the fact that he's confused a lot, and we talked about the paranoia, and he's more anxious around people. And so you can only take Terry in small doses now.
So this almost familial relationship you guys had has been forever altered in your opinion.
That's correct.
That's all I have for you, Mark.
Thank you.
The other lawyer, let's see, may have a few questions. The other lawyer may have a few
Oh,
questions.
absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Egan?
Yes, thanks, Your Honor.
How's it going?
It's Harith.
Harith, yes.
Pleased to meet you, Mr. Harith.
Pleased to meet you.
My name's James Egan. I have a few questions from the defense. How long were the stays that you had with Mr. Sanderson prior to the accident? You described staying with him, I think,
Right.
50 plus times in the years prior to the accident.
Usually they were like 4 or 5 days at a time.
Okay. And then only limited interaction with him after the accident, is that right?
That's correct.
In person?
That's correct.
When you described your understanding of the accident as you received it from him, I just want to clarify, was it your understanding that that was his own first person understanding, or that he had received that from someone else?
That was his first person understanding of the accident.
So he didn't tell you, I was told this by somebody else.
He did
this
not.
is what happened. You use the word paranoia, which maybe is not a term that can be used technically, perhaps in a medical setting. You described cameras and kind of obsessiveness about people maybe watching him. I'm trying to make a sense of what you mean by
Well,
paranoia.
you know, back to the paranoia, I also used being anxious around people. And so it also came out in the relationships.
Okay.
When I saw him in relationships after the accident.
Okay, so if he denied in medical records after the accident, he denied paranoia, would you be surprised?
No.
Okay,
Not
would
at
you
all.
dispute that?
I wouldn't be surprised at
Okay.
that at all.
And would you dispute if there are medical records that show that he acknowledged taking medications prior to the accident for lack of motivation? You wouldn't dispute that?
I have no knowledge of that.
Okay. And do you have any knowledge of prior history with a stroke-like event that caused the need for MRI scanning of the brain?
No, I do not.
What about brain imaging findings years before the accident that are consistent with aging? Do you know anything about that?
No, I do not.
What about cancer diagnosis?
I think he had prostate cancer.
Okay.
Yeah, he did.
What about heart palpitations or heart trouble before the accident?
Not aware of that.
Microvascular disease?
Don't know about that.
Were you aware of any medications he was taking before the accident?
I was not.
Osteoarthritis?
Nope.
Knee problems?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
A foot drop?
A foot drop?
Yeah. Are you aware of what that is?
I'm not.
Okay, as I understand it, kind of, malfunction of the foot such that you're sort of pulling your leg slightly.
No, I never actually witnessed or saw that or heard him talk about it.
Okay. Respiratory problems?
Nope.
Sleep apnea?
Not aware of sleep apnea, no.
Insomnia?
Nope.
Okay. Anxiety before the accident, and I mean in the sense that he was taking medication for that condition, not just that
You're
he was
telling me he
anxious.
was taking medication?
Yeah. Were you
I'm not aware
aware
of that, no.
You're not aware. Okay. Were you aware of any post-accident travel that he did internationally?
Well, he did a lot of traveling before the accident, but I would be, no, I'm not aware of any. There may have been a trip that he made, but no, I can't remember.
Okay. It sounded like you were going to say you'd be surprised if he traveled after, or am I putting
Right,
words
yeah,
in your... Okay.
yeah.
There's a record that the jury's heard about a few weeks before the accident. It's a medical record where Mr. Sanderson reported to his physician that he was getting old all of a sudden and not doing things that he used to do. Do you remember him expressing any similar sentiments prior to the accident?
No, because when I knew him before the accident, he was still active.
Okay. And your wife is Shay, correct?
No, that's my
sorry,
brother's
your
wife.
brother's wife, correct. Okay.
My wife is Lori.
Yes, sorry. She, I believe, has described your relationship with Mark you are Mark, with Mr. Sanderson as one-sided.
One-sided?
Have you ever heard that?
I have not heard that. In which way was it going, supposedly?
I'll give you a little more, maybe, and then you can tell me if
Okay.
you have a similar understanding. There was testimony that Mark was finding out when my dad, Mr. Sanderson, would be gone so that he could be in the house without my dad there.
No, that's not true.
That's not true?
No. My visits were based on storms.
Okay. And then there was a sense that Mr. Sanderson was frustrated with you because of that one-sidedness, and that he thought it was not worthwhile to have a one-sided relationship, and that was the reason you guys stopped having a relationship. Does that...
That's not true on my side. If he
Okay.
felt that way, he never expressed it to me.
Okay. I think you said that you went to the home of Mr. Sanderson after the accident, maybe 2 weeks following. Is that correct?
Well, I think we met up for dinner.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
Did you have any interaction with Carlene Davidson during that time?
I had interaction with Carlene, but I couldn't say it was after the accident,
Okay.
for certain.
So Mr. Sanderson didn't talk about who was caring for him in those weeks just after the accident?
I don't recollect
Okay.
that aspect of it, no.
I believe that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Sorensen?
Mr. Harris, do you, or Mark, do you discuss medications and medical conditions with all of your friends?
No, I think it's a very personal thing, and I don't think I should be discussing or asking that kind of question with anybody.
Do you ever read your friends' medical records?
I do not.
Okay. And would it surprise you, and I know that there were some questions about this one-sided relationship, just barely, would it surprise you if Shay Harris actually said, I don't know if I would call it an estrangement. I don't think Mark knows why my dad hasn't been reaching out towards him. My dad would be civil to Mark, I believe, so it wasn't like a horrible thing that happened between them, as far as I know. He just thinks, I think my dad has forgotten how much Mark has really been there to help him through all of this. Would that surprise you?
No.
Okay.
That's all I have for you.
Thanks.
Mr. Egan, anything else?
No.
All right. And is this witness under subpoena?
Not this, Your Honor.
So we can release him from the exclusionary rule?
Yes.
Okay. You're free to go. You have no further responsibilities here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Plaintiff may call their next witness.
Call Shay Harris.
How's the jury doing for a break? Why don't we take a short break? Or did the jury say they wanted a break?
Yes.
Okay, we'll take a short break then, and then we'll proceed to lunch after, or we'll stay in the courtroom until lunchtime after that.
All rise for the jury.
We go a little afternoon before we break for lunch. Juries are on their way. Don't you plan on breaking around 1:15 for lunch? Okay. Or, you know, give or take, depending on where you're at.
You assume he won't be done, Your Honor. We'll be on the next witness by then.
True. Mr. Sorensen?
Please call Shay Harris.
Thank you.
Hi. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give in the case now before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You can have a seat.
Good morning. Would you start by getting your body toward the microphone position, and then give your full name and spell your name, please?
My name is Shay, S-H-A-E, middle name and maiden name Sanderson, S-A-N-D-E-R-S-O-N. Last name is pronounced like Harris with a lisp. It's Harith. H-E-R-A-T-H.
Hi, Shay.
Hello.
Just as a little preliminary matter, as we're talking, just remember to say yes or no instead of nodding or mm-hm's, okay?
Yes, sir.
I know you're nervous.
Yes, I am.
You know, so that's okay. But what I say is less important than what the jury hears you say.
Okay.
So we're talking right now, but if you wouldn't mind addressing the jury when you're asking your questions, or when you're answering your questions, excuse me, that would be wonderful.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Why don't we start, since you've already said your name, by telling us where you went to high school?
I went to high school in Soda Springs, Idaho, and it's a small little town.
Mm-hmm. And then where'd you go on to college?
I started at Utah State University in Logan, Utah, and transferred up to University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho.
Okay. And did you graduate from college?
I did.
Okay, and what was your degree?
I have a bachelor's of landscape architecture.
Okay. And briefly for us, give us, after college, a little bit of your work history.
After college, I took my first job in Beaverton, Oregon, which is funny because it's really close to where I was born in Hillsboro, Oregon. So I was returning back to where my roots were. And I worked for a small family-owned business. My boss was about 72 years old, and his daughter also was my boss, but he was the most joyful man I've ever known. He made me laugh every day, and he passed away recently, and he's going to be missed, but he's with me in my heart.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We have tissues here if you need.
Oh, thanks. I will be needing those. Do you need some too?
You are one of Terry Sanderson's daughters, aren't you?
I am.
Okay, so give us the birth order if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, I am the eldest of 3 girls, and my middle sister, Polly, has testified already. She's 3 years younger than I am, and I call her my baby sister, but she's not a baby. Her name is Jenny B, and she is 9 years younger than I am, and I was a mom to her, essentially.
And would you describe your sister relationship as a close one?
Very, very close relationship with my sisters. More so with Polly because she was only 3 years younger than me, and I missed out on about 9 years of my little sister Jenny B's growing up. It was kind of surprising. We would see each other on vacations and in between, but I didn't get to witness her growing up.
When you went to college, were you roommates with Polly?
I was roommates with Polly, and she had a hard time waking up in the morning, and so often I had to go into her bedroom and shake her because her alarm would go off for a long period of time. She was my best roommate. Yeah, and friend.
What was it like growing up with Terry as your father?
So I really idolized my dad growing up because he was an extrovert. He was gregarious. Everyone seemed to love him. He had this zest for life, and he just wanted to know so much. He loved to immerse himself in learning more and more about, especially in the health industry. He would read through his medical journals and stuff. But he was a very engaged dad. He would always show up for our events and usually stay and talk with everyone in the community afterwards for hours and hours. So luckily it was nice I could just walk home because otherwise I would be there forever. Let's see. Could you do you want me?
I think you answered my question.
Okay, good enough.
So,
I'll keep going, otherwise
it's okay.
stop me.
It's okay.
I will tell you that things did change later on as I grew up. My parents had a really good marriage the first probably 10 years of their life, but then things they started drifting apart. And so my dad became more of a workaholic towards the latter part of their marriage. That was really I think we could feel that as a family, that things weren't good between them. I was grateful to have my sister Polly when those things would happen. But yeah, we had a happy childhood. I was loved. I was hugged. My dad was very strict, very much. We lived in a small town, so you had to behave yourself or otherwise word would get out. Oh, he was highly demanding, yes.
Would he set expectations and hope that you meet him?
Yeah, that's exactly right. He expected a lot of us girls, and he also kept us incredibly busy, singing voice lessons and acting and dancing. And so my mom was the taxi driver, but she also had a full-time job.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So did you have the opportunity to work with him in his eye clinics as well?
I did. Actually, I was so blessed because there weren't a lot of jobs in my tiny little town. My dad hired me as a 6th grader. I cleaned his office 3 days a week. And then gradually, as I got older, he would teach me more and more of the business. And so I would work with the ladies and help them out and, verify glasses and make sure they were the right prescription, that sort of thing. And I cleaned lots and lots of glasses when I was a 6th grader and probably 7th and 8th grade.
So you got to know your dad from a father perspective, but also see him interact in a business perspective.
I did, and he was amazing. So well organized. He ran that office like a tight ship. He just, everyone had a job to do, and they did it with a smile on their face and love in their heart. And I learned a lot working with him, just about character, really. And I remember him one time, I was going down the hall, and he said, "Shay, you need to walk with purpose. When you go somewhere, walk like you know where you're going and what you're doing." And I thought, that's a good way, to live your life instead of stumbling through life or, I don't know.
We've heard, I think your sisters testified about his desire to mentor. So did you feel that same feeling growing up?
Absolutely. My dad was all about trying to fill our we sisters' heads with as much information as we could. Every road sign that had information on the history, we were pulling over and reading that, going to museums. He really, I think he was very much about character development in us girls, the importance of honesty. yeah, just being a good human being. I think that's mostly what I have to
Just
say.
a little bit. What was your dad like physically growing up? Did you ever notice him to be deficient in any way?
My dad could do anything. In fact, he tried doing a backflip on the trampoline after I had shown him how I could do a backflip. It didn't turn out so well, but he could do almost anything except for a backflip.
How old was he at the time?
Oh,
Frames like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because this all is just like historical.
Yeah, just to establish its relevance.
What time with your...
with my backflipping,
Yes.
let's see, I broke my arm in 3rd grade. It would have been before 3rd grade, so I was 10 years old, so 1980s maybe.
Thank you. So you moved out of the house after college and you didn't return, is that correct?
That is correct. I did come home for summers to work a summer job, though.
Was that working in your dad's clinic or was that somewhere else?
Only my after my freshman year in college did I come home and work for my dad. The other years I was trying to get more landscape architecture background, work experience, and so it was just that year.
Before the accident, and in your time you spent living in the house and even up until 2016, did you ever see your dad have any problems driving a car?
No. He was the ultimate multitasker and drove a car with ease.
Gotcha. When you say multitasker, I think there was some testimony yesterday that he would read a book sometimes while driving. Was that nerve-wracking for you?
Yeah, as a child, I was a little anxious, and when we would head to Montana where the roads go forever straight away, he would actually have a book in his hand while he's driving down these straight roads. And I tended to be a nervous person, so I was always a little bit, probably why I got car sickness maybe, on edge when he was driving and trying to do something else.
It never
But
caused
he
an
was
accident.
never in an accident, as far as I know. I'm sure maybe someone else has everything about him, but I don't recall that ever being a thing.
Moving forward in our timeline a little bit closer to the time of this accident, in roughly 2009 to the time of the accident, are you aware of any of your father's chronic medical conditions?
I recently found an email. Well, first of all, my dad is a really private person, and also he doesn't ever want to be a complainer. And so he has a tendency to keep things to himself. He doesn't share when things are going bad. I think he just doesn't like to be around those kind of complaining people, and so he didn't want to be that kind of person. So I really had very little knowledge about what was going on in my dad's life. He only would call us if he was in a good mood. So, but that being said, just recently I did come across a letter that broke my heart. He said that he...
Before...
Is this too much?
No, it was...
Just objection, hearsay. Can I get a ruling?
I don't know what we're doing here, so can you ask
about-
another question?
Yeah, I'll move on. Let's move to the day of this incident in February of 2016. How did you first hear that your father had been in a ski collision?
I believe that I got an email that said, "I'm famous," in the subject line, and I was like, what are you talking about? And then below there was a link that said, here is information, I may not be quoting it exactly right, from my friend and eyewitness. And then there was a link below. And that link below, I couldn't ever look at it because you had to be like a meetup member or something. But I have a vague recollection of actually calling my dad and saying, can you give me your meetup group number so I can actually look at this? And he was able to give me that information. So I may or may not have seen what was in that link.
You don't remember the day of hitting that link and knowing what it was?
I don't know for sure at what point I looked at it. Just a little background information. I had a ski accident 3 weeks prior to my dad. I had torn my ACL and my MCL. I was not sleeping very well. I had my leg propped up on a pillow with ice around my knee. And I also had a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old to take care of at the time. So my memory of what happened during that period is very foggy.
That's fine. I'm
Yeah.
gonna put up
Okay.
that email, or at least the paper copy of the
Oh.
email. And this has already been marked as, I think, Defense Exhibit 111. And it's been discussed quite a bit, but,
D-102 is the same thing and will be a lot clearer if you want it. Do you want it?
well, we're gonna go through this just the way it is right now.
Well, I
know
object
it's-
because the top portion is not evidence.
Why don't we take it down, and why don't you use the exhibit that has been, unless you need for some reason to enter this one, Mr. Sorensen?
This is okay as he's doing it, Your Honor. Just the top third is not evidence.
Well, I'd rather that the jury not be published a document
Thanks.
that hasn't been
All
admitted.
right.
I want to make you all aware that you are giving out information when we're looking on these private information. Could you please white out the email addresses, or would that take too long?
Sure.
Or you could just fold over that piece of information. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, jury.
No, it's a reasonable request.
Thank you, Defense 102.
Thank you, counsel.
We've discussed this quite a bit, and we will continue to. Do you see that up on your screen, Shay?
I do.
And are you the Shay Hare that's right up here?
I am.
Okay. I'm gonna go through this a little bit, but I want to point out a couple things just before we get into kind of the content. Does this appear to be the email that you were talking about with the link that you described earlier in your testimony? At least a copy of it.
I believe so. I can't remember the time, but I trust that more than I do my memory 7 years ago, so.
Okay. And who's Jenny B. Sanderson?
She is my baby sister, or my youngest sister.
Okay.
She's not a baby.
She appears to be the first person that this email is addressed to, correct?
I agree.
Okay. And then we've heard from Polly. Is that your
Yes,
sister?
that is my second sister.
Okay. And then we're hearing from you right now, correct?
Correct.
So those are the three people that this was sent to.
Yes.
Then going up, we've talked a lot about this, but what is that line right here that I'm pointing to say?
It says, "I'm famous. At what cost?"
Okay. And do you recall, because there's a difference here between I am famous here and I am famous at what cost, who wrote that at what cost?
I added the "at what cost"
Okay.
when I
So
sent my email
after
back.
Sorry, don't want to cut you off, but so after you had tried to access this link, you responded to that email, is that correct?
I don't know at what point I don't know at what point I was able to access, or if I even did see what was here. It seemed like I would follow through to try to see what, because this is important information, but I don't know when that happened.
Okay. And I think you said earlier that when you tried to access this, it was a meetup group login, or it required a meetup group login?
Yes.
Okay.
And I wasn't a member of Meetup, so I was unable to access that. But I knew my dad was.
Okay. I want to talk because it's going to be brought up quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Will you go ahead and read what your note says here for the jury?
Dad, I cannot believe how unlucky and how crazy this all is. I also can't believe this is all on GoPro. What are the chances? I am so glad you're okay. How are you feeling this evening? Love, Shay.
Okay. Now, Shay, this is an important answer, but with that, after being sent that link, how did any reference to a GoPro video come up that you responded in the way that you did?
So we did this in an opposite order. My apologies, 7 years is a long time for my brain. I received a phone call, and thanks to Gwyneth Paltrow's team, they were able to put together the timeline of things. And I had forgotten that actually I got a phone call at 6:13 p.m. that evening, and then I had a conversation with my dad about what had happened. And then the email came later on in the evening. And now I can't remember the question. Do you mind asking again?
You mentioned you had a phone call with your father.
Yes.
How did that instruct or have influence on this response?
Okay. After my dad told me about what he was feeling and that he could hardly think, his brain was numb, and that he couldn't take a breath without feeling a stabbing sensation in his chest, and that he had rung his bell. I believe he mentioned that with this big resort and so many people on this green run, there had to be GoPro video.
Overruled?
Go ahead, continue.
And so he said there has to be GoPro footage. There just has to be, because there was this big blood-curdling scream before I got hit in the back, and that means that a person that had a helmet cam of this GoPro would look towards the scream and catch it all on video. And so I thought, that's brilliant. You know, then we have complete evidence of what happened and who was at fault. And so I kind of assumed that maybe this was GoPro video, and we could rest easy because we would know what happened.
But you had never, he didn't show you a GoPro video?
No, I've never seen GoPro video, and it does not exist as far as I know.
So, and now, after this email, you still have not seen any GoPro video?
I have not seen any GoPro video.
So it was, and I don't want to mischaracterize what you just told the jury, but it was based on that conversation you had with your dad that you responded in this way?
Yes, so I don't know if during the time I was talking to him, if I had my leg propped up and whether or not I was interrupted by my 4-year-old or 8-year-old at the time, but when I hung up that phone, I thought there was GoPro video. And I thought that would be comforting for my dad to say, it's gonna be okay, Dad. I know you are really hurting, but we've got it on camera. So I believed that there was GoPro video at the time, and that's why I said that.
All right. Just want to clear this before we go into that. I'm going to show both of
Lawrence,
them at the same time.
I've left my water bottle next to you. Could you please grab it for me?
The reason that I've laid them on top of each other here is going to be important for the jury. So this has already been admitted, and this is, the jury saw this yesterday. This appears to be the post that your dad put out the day of the incident, talking about the Whitney Smith that that helped him down from the mountain. Have you ever seen this?
And this is Defense 111, page 2.
I recognize this woman's smile, and I do remember he had an awful day, but this woman came to his rescue. She was his angel and taking care of him finally after a long time of being ignored on the mountain.
Oh, Your Honor, just right. That's
Sustained.
hearsay.
Sustained. Response is stricken, and the jury should disregard the last part of the comment.
Sorry.
Do you recall seeing this post?
I do. I do remember reading that at some point.
And the reason I've laid these out and gone kind of old school here with paper instead of the digitals we've been showing is for an important reason. Now, I'm going to zoom in here, down below on this pre-admitted exhibit, and I want you to look at, if we can get it to zoom in a little bit. We'll focus it up. Okay. Do you see below that comments what appears to be some sort of a link?
Are you asking me? Yes, I see the link at the bottom and then the photos too.
And that appears to be from Meetup, the website your dad was posting on. Is that
Yes.
correct? Do you see these numbers here?
Yes.
Okay, you see photos and then slash and some numbers.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want you to look at this. I want you to look and see and tell me, I mean, it's a lot of numbers, but do the photos at the numbers at the end of that exhibit with this exhibit here, do these numbers correlate or match any of these numbers down here? I'll give you a minute to look at it.
Okay. Okay, it appears
Starting with 2-6.
the 2-6 one is the first one, corresponds to the first one. The second one is not anything.
And then this.
And the last one matches up with the exception of the last digit, which is a 2 instead of a 0.
Okay. They're close, is that correct?
They're very close.
Okay.
One's right on, the other is close.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit and get off a little bit away from this email. You've given your explanation for why you wrote about a GoPro video, is that correct?
I have a question. So the fact that the numbers matched up just means that those two are correlated.
It may.
Okay.
I'm not going to ask
Okay.
for an opinion, and
Okay.
I'm not a cybersecurity or
Okay.
not even cybersecurity, but I'm not a cyber expert, so I don't know
Okay.
if that means anything. I just think it's an interesting coincidence for now that those are correlating.
Yeah.
Now, you've given us your reasoning for why you wrote that line about GoPro. Is there anything else that you think may have influenced why you put that in an email?
I think I've already said, I think I just wanted my dad to have peace of mind that there was video footage out there that was going to show what happened.
But you didn't know that there was or was not.
I did not know that. And also, let me just state to the jury that my dad had had a traumatic brain injury when he sent out that email, which is why.
You didn't know that at the time.
Foundation,
what's that?
Your Honor.
Sustained, we do need to wait for a question before we address the jury. So thank you.
Gosh, I'm so sorry.
Strike the evidence that my dad had a brain injury at the time.
Yes, the comment will be stricken and the jury's to disregard.
Let's stay on the facts.
Thank you for the counsel. After the accident, you have maintained contact with your father, correct?
I have.
All right. Have you noticed any big changes in your dad?
My dad has quite a few personality issues. Obviously, the injury to his brain has caused significant damage, enough to cause his personality to change. And
what have you?
Medical opinion. Move to strike.
Overruled as to a lay opinion under Rule 701.
What have you seen as far as your dad's personality traits that have changed?
my dad is very insecure. He doesn't show it, but he doesn't trust his brain anymore.
Is that a hard thing for him?
It's incredibly hard because he used to be able to multitask and do all sorts of complicated tasks, and now he has a hard time just following through one step at a time. And he used to be able to do multiple things at a time, so it's been really hard on his personality. He feels inept, frustrated.
You don't know exactly how he feels, though.
You're right. From his daughter's perspective, I feel that his life is exhausting.
And it's hard to hear. Have you noticed things about his ability, excuse me, let me inartfully ask. Have you noticed any differences in his ability to listen?
Oh. My dad used to be a really good listener. But since the accident, his brain has to work so hard at what he's going to say next that his ears just shut down, and he's goes inside. He's internal, and he may be standing in front of you, but he is not. He's not there. He's gone inside, coming up with the argument or the next thing he's going to say, and so his listening abilities have really been hampered by this brain injury.
Now, you told, in your deposition, you told us a story about the van door. Would you please share that story with the jury?
Okay. First thing, my van door from the time I bought it, it was a brand new van at the time, but it always has a problem. I own a Honda Odyssey, and if you know them, the doors don't swing open like this. They actually go parallel with the body of the car. And so...
Can we just get a foundation for what time frame we're talking about? She did say after this incident.
When did you buy the car?
My daughter was born in 2012. So this happened after 2012. This happened when my oldest was 11, so it's been about 6 years ago.
So this was after the...
This was after the accident, yeah. Thank you. So this van door, because children sometimes ride in it, has an optical sensor that will back the door up. The door will not close automatically, mechanically, if it senses there is something in the way, and that's to prevent a kid's arm or something getting caught in the door. But my van door has had a problem with it thinking that there's something there when there isn't. And there's a really easy fix. You just go to the driver's side, and there's a manual toggle on the dashboard where you turn off the electronics part and you can manually shut the door. Okay, that should be enough background information. My dad and I have picked up my daughters from school, and we're going to the dance shop to get some ballet shoes for my daughter, Tia, who is about 11 years old. And that means her sister is roughly six years old. So we go into the car. Oh, my dad happens to be in the passenger seat as I'm driving the van to the dance shop, and we pull up to a parallel parking position right in front of the store. And because my 6-year-old is in a booster and there's oncoming traffic, I'm paying close attention to get her out. That's not important. What's important is that as we came out, I noticed that the van door on the opposite side so on the curbside had been left open. No one had shut the door, and it's downtown Spokane, so I was a little concerned that we had been robbed or something, but I took a look and everything was where it was supposed to be. And so my older daughter Tia jumped in. Grandpa Terry's right there with her to buckle herself in, and she goes to push the button, and meanwhile I'm actually with my 6-year-old trying to get her into her car seat. So she pushes the button and it does this funky thing, which is it backs off and refuses to close. Well, Tia's known that there's an easy fix for this. You just have to hit the button. And my dad's like, oh, I could do it. I didn't know exactly what was going on at the time. I could see through, and I could hear a heated argument and anger and frustration. And my little daughter is like trying to explain to Grandpa Terry, no, my mom can fix this. And my dad's like, I know what to do. I can get it done myself. I'm the adult here. You're just a little kid. You don't know anything. And he was really laying it down hard on her. I was, anyway, what happened is with all this commotion going on, I figure out what the problem is. And I look over at my dad as he is with all of his might, like a football player trying to push one of those heavy padded things, pushing that door closed, and it is like barely moving. He finally gets it to about 2 inches closed, and I was like, oh, and I switched it to manual, so he was able to close it. And he's like, see, I told you I could do it. And he was just belittling my Tia, my oldest daughter, and just going, you know, I know what to do. I'm the adult here, and just being so awful to her. And it's actually damaged his relationship with her because he was so awful to her. And I got in the front door and closed the door, and I looked back at my little daughter, and she's just red-cheeked, and her tears are streaming down her eyes, and she is just so belittled and made to feel like she's stupid, and I just thought this didn't have to happen. If he had just listened to her, and said, Mom can fix this. And Tia was like, I knew he was going to break the door, Mom. I knew he was going to break the door. And he didn't, luckily, but it was an awful, awful experience. And I have never known my dad to raise his voice or scream or belittle or do those sorts of things. It was just very uncharacteristic of him.
And has Tia told you how she feels about that? Has it changed their relationship?
She does not like my dad. She doesn't like him.
Have you noticed any other times where you've seen your dad since the ski accident in 2016? Have you seen any other times where your dad's raised his voice in anger like he was against his granddaughter?
That was actually the worst I've ever seen, and I will say that my dad and I see eye to eye a lot, so there's not been a lot for us to argue or fight about. So I know my sister Polly alluded to an interaction that she witnessed with my baby sister Jenny, my youngest sister Jenny, in which he got right in her face and said F you, like screamed F you at her, which again, he doesn't talk like that, and he doesn't raise his voice and scream. That was not the old Terry that I knew as a dad.
You had never seen that growing up with him?
No, not at all. He was so patient.
Have you seen or known your dad? Since you brought up your sister, Jenny.
Yes.
And this incident the jury heard about yesterday.
Yes.
You know the family dynamics in your family, correct?
Yes, I do. It's complicated.
Every family is. There's people that are maybe closer to one another than further away. Is that your perception?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your...
said in every family, there's relationships that are closer or maybe some that are further away. Is that your perception?
Yes.
Okay. And how would you characterize your father's, from your own opinion, your father's and Jenny's relationship?
Before the accident or after the accident?
Let's say before, and then we'll ask after.
Okay. My sister, Jenny B, is neurotypical, and she...
A conference at your bar?
Yeah, sure. All right. This appears to be a good time to take our lunch recess, so we will do that at this time, returning at 1:30. Ms. Hurst, if you could just remain here for just a moment. Thank you. All right, so Ms. Hurst, there's a lot of medical experts in this case,
Okay,
and you're not one of them.
it's true.
And so we want to be careful that your testimony limits itself to what you observed,
Okay,
and maybe opinions that you formed based on those observations.
okay,
But what we don't want you to testify to is a medical diagnosis of Jenny, a mental health diagnosis of Jenny, or I guess describe what you've seen with her in terms of a medical diagnosis or medical terminology. Does that make sense?
We don't want that last one. Is that what you just said, Your Honor?
I think I'm a little confused.
Yes, we do not want you to be explaining what you've observed with Jenny in terms of a mental health diagnosis. Like a person with this mental health diagnosis is, I see Jenny doing these things that are like a person with this mental diagnosis.
Okay.
But rather, just what did you see?
Oh, what do you notice about her? Okay.
Well, what have you observed?
Mm-hmm.
And what, and you're certainly,
Is the word, was the key word that you didn't want to hear was the neurodiversity?
I think that probably triggered the concern.
Because that's more of a medical terminology?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like an everyday observation, though.
You're right.
So-
Okay, I understand.
I mean, I could see you translating, I mean, if you made an observation about Jenny,
Mhm.
and you're using that term to describe that observation, I could see you translating that into everyday words
Okay, I
as to
see.
what you saw and what you observed.
Okay.
But in terms of using a medical sounding name, I guess, or label,
Okay,
that's what we need you to avoid.
okay.
Is council okay with that instruction?
Yes, and I just want to make one other statement that's separate from this.
Just a minute, then.
Thanks.
I don't want to conflate the two. Are you okay with that instruction to the witness?
Yes.
Okay.
Your Honor,
Mr.
we're
Owens?
making copies. My staff has advised me that somehow with the help of I'm not even going to misspeak, except someone has accessed that link that we've been trying to get.
Well, right,
I'm going to hand out copies.
why don't we do this in chambers? And if you need to put something on the record, we can do that after that.
Sure, and I'm not even prepared to. I've just been advised that that link has been accessed. Not a GoPro link, but the actual link.
It's just that this witness is under the exclusionary rule, and I'd rather not discuss it in front of this witness.
Fair enough. Should we meet at, when do you want to meet?
1:15, would that be enough time?
Sure, in chambers?
Yeah, let's start in chambers. And if you could make me a copy?
Yeah, we're making some copies. I just got handed it.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. And thank you, you're welcome to go take lunch or whatever, but you're still under the exclusionary rule as a witness, not to discuss the case with other witnesses or anybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.